Welcome to the Bonneville Up to Speed podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oeste, and this is a podcast covering all things land speed racing on every level, from vintage small displacement motorcycles to cutting-edge streamliners and everything in between. And today, we're honored to have a very special guest, land speed racing legend, Mr. Danny Thompson. Danny, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Anytime I get to speak about Bonneville, I like it.
Awesome. Well, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on, man. You've got a long history with land speed racing, and you've done some pretty awesome stuff over the years. So it's our pleasure to have you on. What I like to do in a lot of these interviews is we don't have to go to the granular detail level, but let's kind of go back in time a little bit and learn about how you got started. When you got the racing bug? I mean, outside of it being hereditary, I guess.
Yeah, it is hereditary. And I started racing when I was 9 years old, and I raced quarter midgets when I was 9 and 10. And then at the end of the second year, a kid crashed in a race. My dad built Lions drag strip, right? So back in the 50s. And so they actually, after a few years, he put a quarter midget track in right behind the drag strip, behind the bleachers. And so I was over there racing quarter midgets and having fun. And anyway, a kid got upside down in my race and got hurt. And somebody ran over to the other side where my dad was, ran on the drag strip, and said, "Hey, Danny got upside down and he's hurt." And my dad came running over there and looked. It wasn't even me. I happened to win the race, and I was sitting there with the trophy girl, all little, whatever you are, 9 years old,
Sure.
All happy and everything. And my dad looked at the car, wasn't even me, and took the car away, sold it right there in the spot, and told me I'd never race again in my life.
Wow.
So I did not race again till I left the house when I was 18 and started racing motorcycles. So I got to start real early, but only 2 years there, and then nothing. And my dad just said, "If you want to race, you got to do it on your own. I'm not helping you because I don't want." He wanted me to be an attorney.
Oh, all right.
That didn't quite fit in with my plan very well.
Well, I mean, you can only imagine the, so your dad was obviously watching that race and probably knew that you were, in the lead or a contender. So those feelings are all excitement. And then all of a sudden to have your feelings go 100% the other direction into tragedy, that left a mark on him for sure. And he just wanted you to be safe. So I understand it, I guess.
No, and you're right. And I understand it too now, especially now as a parent. But back then, I certainly didn't understand it. And you also got to think back to those years. And I mean, people were getting killed a lot in cars back in there. My dad lost his driver, Dave McDonald, at the Speedway at Indianapolis in 1964. And it was a, forever lasting impact on him. And so all that affected, everything I did later. So then, I just went ahead and did it on my own. And, had some fun, won some races, happened to do pretty well a few times. So we were all happy about that.
So those were the days, like you're saying, of motorcycle racing, and you did a few other types of racing too at that time period, huh?
Yeah. So race motorcycles, motocross, and then off-road racing, sprint car racing, Formula Atlantic, Formula V. Oh, not Formula V, Super V. I'm sorry, Super V.
Okay.
And yeah, a little bit of everything. We like I said, we had some luck in a few of them, so happy. And then, but the goal was always to go to Indianapolis. That's all I ever wanted in life, was to go to the Speedway. And that just didn't never quite work out. Got close, after I won a championship in Formula Atlantic, and at least showed I had some of it. Ability to go to the next step, but it just never quite got there. And then I think it was 80, I don't know, sometimes in the late 70s, I guess. I'm not very good at the years. I always forget. Been upside down too many times, I think.
It's okay. Yeah. In your case, they go by fast.
Yeah, they do. But yeah, I did, started racing off-road in my dad's series. My dad actually steered me that way to keep me away from the Speedway. And so
wow.
I raced for Chevrolet, I think, for 8 years on the Stadium series that my dad produced, the MTE Stadium series. And then I drove for Ford, I think, for another year after that. And then I was kind of, our son Travis was born. Valerie and I had a son in '88, and so then my priorities switched, and it was a lot. Make sure that he got to soccer practice, and whatever
For sure.
whatever the stuff was, speech tournaments and whatever. So, and we had moved away from LA, so it was a little bit harder. But that's when Bonneville started to come back into the picture, way back then.
Now, it's interesting that your dad clearly never let go of that fear of something happening to you if he was trying to steer you away from going fast at Indy into something that's still obviously very dangerous in racing, but, that stadium series certainly wasn't quite Indy.
No, it wasn't Indy. It was a ton of fun. I mean, we had 18 races in a 3-hour period, and from motorcycles to quads, Super 1600 buggies, and then the trucks, of course, and the trucks were the main show. But it was he steered me that way, and I understand. Am I pissed off about not going to Indy? Yeah. At 73 years old, am I going to go? No.
Yeah.
But but the Bonneville thing came up late in life, and it's funny. Bonneville is a strange animal up there, and everything, like, I did a lot of different kind of racings that we just talked about, and different series and all that stuff, and thought I knew a lot about everything until I got to Bonneville and realized I knew nothing about nothing. And it's just Bonneville. Everything you've learned about racing, you just need to throw it all out the window and go with a whole fresh attitude and soak in that whole Bonneville vibe and how you got to drive at Bonneville. And I mean, fast hands are probably one of the most important things ever in racing. Not at Bonneville.
For sure.
Fast hands will get you in big trouble.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the great draws of Bonneville, especially because when you have people that have had, like yourself, some success in other forms, Bonneville is proof that there's always something different out there that requires a whole new skill set, in addition to the awesome history, and then just how cool it is because, these are amateur people out there. There's no Coca-Cola sponsorship at Bonneville. So these are really people that are dedicated to doing this. And in your case, there is a story that your dad started that you kind of picked up the ball on. So give us some context on that.
Well, my dad was the first American to go over 400 miles an hour in 1960 in Challenger 1, and he went 406.6, which was an accomplishment because him and Fritz Voigt, they built this car, and a bunch of other people, other fabricators and tin benders and stuff like that, but they built this car in my dad's garage in El Monte, and they basically took 4 Pontiac engines, and they were in just on pallets, and set them in the middle of the floor and kind of pushed them up against each other and looked at it, and then they took a piece of chalk and they drew a piece of chalk line all the way around the car on all 4 corners and said, well, this is about what it's going to look like, as a package. And they went from there and put that thing together. And in 59, I think my dad ran 363 with the 4 Pontiac engines in it, but it didn't have enough horsepower to make the next step. So they went back that year and bolted 4 blowers on that thing and went back in 60 and then went 406.6. But the caveat of that whole deal is my dad did not get the record. The record, he went faster than the record. The record, I think, was 396 at that time, held by, I just had brain fade, Englishman.
Yeah, Cobb, right?
Cobb, yeah, John Cobb, sorry. And,
it's okay.
So my dad went 406, but on the return run, they lost an engine. My dad never said it was an engine. He said it was a dry shaft, but because my dad just had Pontiac sponsorship from Mr. Knudsen at the time. So he already knew how to play the PR game and don't badmouth your sponsor, But,
for sure.
So on the return run, when he shifted, he had one shift lever that shifted 4 transmissions at the same time. Certainly no electronics or anything. One throttle pedal that worked 36 fuel injectors. Man. All of this stuff that here's my dad and Fritz that are, I wouldn't say they're uneducated, but certainly academically they were uneducated. They didn't go to school and they didn't get engineering degrees, but these guys were like probably some of the best practical engineers.
Yeah. So everything about this story is like the definitive American hot rodders story. These are people that took what they had in their home garage, learned the things the hard way. Very, very smart individuals, but like you're saying, they don't have a piece of paper on the wall, perhaps. But there's no fooling anyone. These are smart guys, and they went out and did basically the impossible. It's awesome.
Yep. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. When you go out there.
Yeah, you do it or you don't.
So my dad didn't get the record, although they talked about the one-way speed a lot, so people always thought he had the record. And then in 1968, Summers Brothers in 65 went 409 at two-way average, which was an amazing car and another amazing engineering feat. Mm-hmm. And then in 68, my dad hooked up with Ford, and they built the Challenger 2, or at the time it was called the Autolite Streamliner. And so that car in 68 was to come back and actually get the record and bring it to the Thompson family name. So also at the same time, my dad ran 3 Mustangs up at Bonneville on the big circle. So this was all part of Ford's introduction to the 1969 Mach 1 Mustang. And so I think him and my dad and Angias drove, and they set over 300 national and international records at Bonneville that summer.
That's incredible.
Right?
Wow.
So, can you imagine? I mean, a Mustang running, I think, I forget numbers a lot of times, I think 156 miles an hour for 24 hours.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Flat surface.
Right.
Flat surface, no bank, no nothing, and no traction. And anyway, the two of them, they did that. And then, so after that was done, and they set, like I said, over 300 records. And then it was Challenger 2's, Autolite Special's turn to go. And they had some teething problems with it. My dad spun it going pretty fast. And as it was developing, they had some steering issues and stuff. But they finally got it where they thought they were all ready to run it. And like I said, this is 68. I was just getting out of high school, or had just gotten out of high school. And the day that they were going to go for a record, it rained. And that was way late in the season. So that was October 28th when it rained. That's it for the year. So the car goes back in the trailer, or goes home, it gets cleaned up and whatever other issues that they thought got addressed. And that's the year. So that in 1969, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, they all quit their big race programs, their big support for race programs. So that win on Sunday, sell on Monday deal went right out the window. The bean counters said, nah, we're not buying that whole deal anymore. And so that car sat in a trailer basically for 42 years.
Man.
Untouched, because my dad went on to other projects. My dad had so much stuff going on. He ran Indy, built his own cars for Indy, and then boat racing, and then drag racing, and 69 is when the funny car development really started. Once again, Angias driving for my dad. So the car sat in a trailer for all those years. And then in 1980, late 87, now my dad still didn't support any of my racing, right? So, but he came to me in 87 and he said, I want to run the Challenger 2 at Bonneville. And I said, well, that's nice. I said, if you need some help, I said, I'll come up and help you. And anyway, he said, I'd like to have you drive it.
Man.
And like right now, the hair is just standing up on my arms, right?
Hey, it's doing it to me too.
It was just magical. So we said, okay, cool. We got the car out and looked at it and started making a plan. And I was going to do the mechanical stuff and fabrication and hire a team to do all that. And then my dad was going to run the front end and find sponsorship and that stuff. And then we were going to run it as a father-son team. And then it was just 3 months after all those decisions got made that my dad got killed.
Yeah.
And, the thing went back in the trailer, I think, for 18 more years or something. So,
all right, we're gonna pause right there for a sec, because I have a few questions along the way. Okay. One of the things that I find interesting when we talk about some of the factory support of land speed racing and Bonneville back in those days, you mentioned the Mustangs. I think it was a 69 Mustang advertisement, and he was either shot at El Mirage or Bonneville. And it was an overhead shot of the 69 Mach 1. And the tagline was, if you don't have a past, get a Mach 1, which I thought was pretty cool. But it was shot right there in the, on a dry lake, I think. Yeah.
It was at Bonneville.
Yeah, there you go. So it was Bonneville. And I love the fact that even for a while, there was some factory support of land speed racing because it's few and far between, first of all. But the next question I have for you is, all this really interesting timing in your life. So now you get out of high school. You said you left home at 18 and you were a little bit, free to do what you wanted, which is coincidentally the same time the streamliner program goes away. So not only if you had your dad's blessing, the means weren't even there to do it at that point. Yeah. And when you said it went in the trailer, literally describe, where was it? Was it parked next to the building outside in a trailer and everybody just walked past this thing every day knowing what was in there? Or what was the deal?
Basically, yeah. There was that. There's a, this is in Long Beach down where my dad's, shop was, where they made, rods and pistons and that kind of stuff. And valve covers and wheels and clutches and all that stuff. But yeah, it just sat there outside. A whole bunch of cars sat outside it wasn't an enclosed trailer, Challenger 2 was. Mm-hmm. But most of the other Indy cars and everything just sitting out there in the weather.
Oh man.
Rotting away. And that sat there like that forever. I went when I left the house, I went skiing for a while and I think I left to go for the weekend and didn't come home for 5 years. Was a ski bum and that stuff. But then I came back to work for my dad and building off-road cars and stuff. So I'm a fabricator by trade, a welder basically.
Awesome.
That's what I do. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, there was so many different phases in between there, but pulled them all off a little bit at a time and learned a lot working for my dad, and then left there and went to work for an IndyCar team, built some Indy cars, and then left there and went to work for Danny Thompson at Interscope Racing. And we ran an IndyCar team and a sports car team. So like this week, for this week example, last week we would have been at Indianapolis running a car, and then this week I would have been at Le Mans for 24 hours as a mechanic, fabricator guy, fixing things. So
sure,
I did that for a number of years, on that circuit for a long time, always wanting to get closer to Indy, hoping that somehow I could, get in there. But yeah,
right.
It didn't work out. But it's funny because we go to Bonneville finally. Then, I didn't have that much interest in Bonneville or the Salt or any of that stuff, because Indy was always, that's the thing I want to do. Mm-hmm. And went back, and Jim Travis got me involved at Bonneville again, and I had actually given him my dad's pumpkin seed car to restore. Mm. He restored it and then ran it, and then I went up and drove that. First, before that, I got in with the Fergusons. They're quite, they're a big name at Bonneville.
They're an institution in the sport for sure. It's awesome.
They are. And that's who I'm driving for this August again. Mm-hmm. So my car's not around anymore. But
we'll get to that part.
Okay.
So kind of rewinding once again. So here we are, 87. Your dad says, hey, I want you to drive this thing. You guys unpack the car eventually. And what did it need for sitting for 20 or 42 years?
Well, the engines were gone. Both engines were gone. So it needed an engine package. And, it ran single overhead cam Fords in there. So an injected one in the front and a blown one in the back. And the reason for that is so you can have eyesight over the front of the car. You can't have a blower sticking up there. So, and then he set in between the two engines. And so it needed engines, it needed transmissions. Basically, if you're going to run the car just like that, you could have probably put cameras back in it, and it had B&M automatic transmissions in it at the time. But so anyway, that's what we were just starting, what engine package we wanted to run, whether it was going to be, certainly the one engine was going to be blown, and, whether you could, all the different combinations that were there. So, and then when my dad passed, like I said, I put the car back away, and it was in my shop in Colorado, and I walked around that thing, 76 steps, by the way, to walk around it.
But who's counting?
Yeah, for 15 years, so, and looked at that thing and dreamed about it, and then my wife Valerie and I were sitting on the couch, and I'm always talking about that streamliner, and then I'm sitting there on the couch with Valerie, and we said, well, I wonder, well, you know what? I don't want to wonder. I don't want to be sitting on this couch when I'm 80 years old wondering, could that car run 400 miles an hour? And then it was a whole resurgence. My son was already gone and away to college and stuff by that time. And it was okay, how are we going to do this? So anyway, I got the car, the skeleton, basically, all the body and everything was all still there. And the frame was still there, and brought it down to California and started working on it. And it's funny because the whole Bonneville deal, once again, is such a much bigger deal than you think. Because I said, well, I bet I'll work on this thing and thrash and maybe get some help. And in a year, we'll be up there, going fast, setting records, kissing babies. 8 years later.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, it's so much work and so much planning and preparation and thinking stuff that you don't. And anyway, we didn't have any money to do it and that kind of stuff. So we struggled with trying to get this or that and couldn't find any sponsorship. So it was just a little bit at a time. The first thing we did is built a fixture to get the car back up on stands so we could start looking at it and squaring it and all that stuff. So, and then figuring out what engine combinations we were running. That's where Jerry Darien came in, and we ran that Brad Anderson aluminum block Hemi injected. So we didn't put a blown motor in the back because I didn't want to deal with the horsepower difference.
I was going to say that would be a lot to manage.
So here's how my dad managed it, right? You got to hold on for this. So he had the throttle pedal was split, right? So the rear engine made 1,200 horsepower. The front engine made 600 horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
The throttle pedal was split, four-wheel drive. Front engine drove the front wheels, rear engine drove the rear wheels. So the throttle pedal was split. So if he felt like the rear tires were spinning or the front tires were spinning, he would roll his foot from one side of the throttle to the other to make the front or rear engine.
Are you kidding me?
No,
wow.
That's the first thing I took out of that car was that thing, because I know I'm not smart enough to do that.
Oh my gosh. What a recipe to mat both of those pedals and spin the thing around in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So
That's great.
It's just, so there was lots of little things. The frame was too narrow to fit the Hemis in there. So, I had to chop up the frame rails, and it was, like I said, it took 8 years of making this all happen. So I mean, there wasn't a crew. It was just me at first, probably for the first 3 years, and then we hired a guy named Frank Hannerhan, fabricator that I'd worked with before, and Frankie was really good. And then we brought in Lou Anderson, and then we had this whole kind of group of people that were watching from afar and thinking, I don't think this thing can happen, and I definitely don't think it can happen with a 50, at the time, 42-year-old car.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't think that, but this group was all interested, and they would come by after work, and, we'd have a beer and that stuff. And anyway, as things started happening, these people, like the group, started coming by more often and more often. And pretty soon we had a core group of guys that were volunteer that were unbelievable. I mean, it was fantastic. The camaraderie of this whole group as it all came together. And we got Mickey Thompson Tire came along and sponsored us the first 2 years. And so then we had a little bit of money to, we had 2 people working full time, me,
Mm-hmm.
3 people. 2 people got paid, me, no.
Yeah, well.
Mine went into the deal. And anyway, it was just, this whole group became like, what's today? I think Thursday night, we got together and we just, sat down and had a beer together and just talked. It's still such a close-knit group. But anyway, it all came together and started happening. So it was fantastic.
Now, you mentioned this was you're reviving a 42-year-old car, but it was a 42-year-old car that was, designed by Mickey Thompson. So, I mean, it had thought in it the first time that I'm guessing some of the upgrades were maybe safety related to bring it up to current.
That's true. I mean, we had to cut the roll cage out because it had 1.5 inch 090 roll cage in it, and that wasn't legal for SCTA. So, we pumped it up to 1 3/4 120 wall, and just lots of little things like that, and how to figure the transmission deal out. And my dad had wagon wheel steering in it. So basically, if you pull a little red wagon, the same steering it has. So when you turn it, the wheelbase changes. I mean, not that we turn, I'm very much up there, but anyway, SCTA made that be illegal. So we had to come up with a whole new steering system. And talk about complicated. When you got a car that's only 36 inches wide, you got 2 wheels and tires, brakes, rear end,
Sure.
half shafts, all that to package within 36 inches. And Tim Gibson, who was our engineer, or still is our engineer, he came along and I said, can you do this mechanically? Because he's an aero engineer. And he worked for Bernstein, he worked for John Force, he worked for Dan Gurney as an aero guy. So, lots of experience and really, really smart, way, way smart. Anyway, he took this project on and to make this so this would be legal and we could actually turn it and everything, and came out unbelievable. Frankie and Lou made most of the parts. I welded them all together. And just little things like that started. We lengthened the back of the car by 32 inches, put a strake on the bottom of it. We had wings on it at one time, but they worked too good. So, lots of little things as we worked. The first time we went up there and ran was 2014. And that's when I'd driven up there a few times and driven for Jim Travis up there in the pumpkin seed and stuff, and got in the 200-mile-an-hour club, which is a big deal. And but going up there now on your own with a streamliner with multi-engines in it. So we had 3 engine guys. Jerry Darian did the original layout, and he's an A-fuel guy. He taught a lot of people how to drive. They went to the Jerry Darian School of Driving. Both the four, I think all 3 Force girls went there, and Brandon Bernstein went through his program of A-fuel before you went into either Top Fuel or Funny Car. But he did the original layout on these injected motors. Once again, I guess I skipped off of no blowing engine in the back and injected engine in the front. But so we ran 2 injected engines, not like my dad did, because like I said, I wasn't smart enough to work that throttle pedal.
Yeah, 2 engines, 1 gas pedal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. 1 throttle pedal.
Yeah.
And
all right, now
figure out what transmissions and all that kind of stuff.
As you're going through this thing, again, the timing is really interesting to me because you unfortunately did not have your dad next to you to ask him questions about what he was thinking when they did this the first time. So was there a little mental conversation you were having with him along the way as you figured this car out?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
I still talk to him every day.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, how would you have done this? And, Frankie was really smart, and Lou was really smart, and then we had Gibson, and then Dave Hadley did. We put together what we called the Hadley box, because we could never figure out a better name for it, and because Dave Hadley did all the machining. But we hooked the front, rear end, and the rear, so basically front wheels and the rear wheels together via a 3-piece dry shaft down the side of the car. And so what it did is the front didn't drive the rear and the rear didn't drive the front. But for example, say if the front engine blew up and seized, the thing would go into neutral, slipper clutches, and then the rear dry shaft from the rear wheels would drive the front wheels. So like it's not like it locked up and the rear end's still driving over the top of the front end trying to twist it into a ball. So we just little things like that. It was all machined out of billet and had a blower belt that drove it. And I mean, it was that some of the things that were figured out by this group of people that we all put together was some pretty interesting stuff.
Now, can you go into that Hadley box concept a little bit more so that I understand this better? It sounds to me, just take me through the path of power from the engine to the transmission, then it goes to the box and then the shaft?
Yeah, I'm going to actually walk right over here to this picture.
Oh, right on.
So I can explain it in detail. So going for say the rear engine. You got the regular deal, you got a rear end and you got the rear tire sitting there. Then you got a short 12-inch dry shaft. And then it goes into a transmission, which was a 3-speed B&J, guys out of Salt Lake City. And from the transmission, it went into the Hadley box. And now the Hadley box bolts right to the bell housing. So you come off the back of the crankshaft into the Hadley box, and it's got a spline shaft in there and a blower belt drive pulley. And so what that does is so that pulley goes regular top fuel blower belt, 4-inch wide thing, and it goes over to the side of the car. And then there's another little shaft that sticks out, not little, big shaft that sticks out of there, and that goes into the dry shaft. So then from the back of the Hadley box, then it goes into the transmission, and from transmission into the dry shaft again. And then the front end's exactly the opposite. So the engine sits in there backwards. So you go from the engine, which is at the front of my feet, engine into the Hadley box and the whole collaboration again on the front. And like I said, the front engine drives the front wheels and the rear engine drives the rear wheels.
Mm-hmm.
And then off the front of the car, you got basically a 50-gallon fuel tank, two tanks built into one, and that's to drive both engines, which takes about 42 gallons to make a run.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine.
5 miles, and that was I think the last run we ran 87% nitro. To go 5 miles, that's my fuel test.
Yeah, that's a lot of fuel, but you made a lot of power and you made a lot of speed.
Yep, we did. We were fortunate enough to get going, and that last run it was very marginal because the car got really sideways at about 420 or 30 miles an hour. Well,
yeah. So let's take us through now. We've got the car finished and ready to run anyway. And was that 17 or 18?
16 was it for, or 14?
14. There you go. So you had a few years before you actually.
Well, then you got into the Bonneville deal because so in 14 we went up and we ran the test and tune, which only you could only run 3 miles. That's the USFRA meet that just got canceled today actually because they didn't have enough entries. But so we went up there and we ran on a 3-mile course just to make sure. Well, we ran El Mirage first. We just went up there and made one pass down there to make sure it steered, which it didn't, and adjust some things. It steered right real well. It just didn't steer left.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Just some adjustments and stuff like that. And then up to Bonneville. So we ran that. We ran, I think, 318 miles an hour in the 3-mile the first time we ran the car.
Wow.
And then. So we learned some things and some, bunch of stuff we went wrong and what all we didn't have to go to Bonneville and spare parts and all that kind of stuff. And then we went back 3 weeks later for Speed Week and it rained.
Mm-hmm.
And so now are we going to get to run? Well, 3 weeks after that was a USFRA meet and the sun was out enough and the wind blew hard enough. So we went back up and ran that. And I think we ran... So that was the first time on a 5-mile course, and the very first run, and it was wet and slippery. The very first run was 392 miles an hour on a 394 record.
Wow!
And so more things you learn at Bonneville, right? So everything in this car, you got to imagine now. This car was built in 1968 by Nye Frank, Tom Job, Pat Foster, Skinner. I mean. Quinn Epperly, the people that worked in this car, I put all their names on the car from 68.
Cool.
Unbelievably talented group of people that had so much success. And these were all kids when I built it for my dad. But anyway, so to get back to the story, so everything was very tight. Helmets are bigger, roll bars had to be bigger. Getting in and out of that car was a Houdini act. And, especially with 5-layer suit on and Hans device and all that stuff. And anyway, we put the fire bottles, they were only about 1.5 inches away from the steering wheel. So I could just reach my hand up and pull them. And I didn't want any slack in any of the cables or anything. So I had the guys make everything really tight. Well, the very first run at 392 miles an hour, went through the lights, pulled the parachutes. I'd never been over 260, I think, before that. And so it went from 260 to 392, pulled the parachutes, and all of a sudden I can't see anything. Nothing. All this water and foam and everything is all over my face. And
oh, man.
What in the heck's going on? So completely blind. So I pull my visor up, right, because now I'll be able to see. Well, it was the fire bottles that went off because I had to make no slack in the cables and everything was so tight when the parachutes hit. The fire bottles off it. So now I flip my visor up so I can see, and the fire bottles are still going off right in my eyes.
Oh, man.
And now I'm going nearly 400, and I'm going, yeah, well, what do you do now? You have lots of experience up here, right?
Right, first time.
And so I'm going. I must be getting down toward the 8-mile mark, and, you're going to get stuck down there. And so I turned off, and the thing came to rest, and it was, well, we made it through that and went back went back to the pits and everything. And so now we're 2 miles an hour under the record, right? So we didn't qualify for a return pass for a record. So we went out the next morning, went right back out and ran 419 miles an hour.
Boom.
Qualified, and everything worked good. And so now we're really, really happy. And go back the next morning for the return run, and we broke a clutch. But that was the first time, and it was like all of this happening, and you're thinking you're knowing everything about everything, that you're a smart old guy, and all your people are smart. You don't know anything about anything.
Yeah, Bonneville has a way of pointing that stuff out. When those fire bottles went off, so the chute's deployed, so the thing is decelerating, but you're just out of control. You can't see anything. You're along for the ride.
Yeah. We're still going straight because I'm concentrating on my hands, but I can't see my hands.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I don't really know if my hands are right or left, and it's got 90 degrees each way to turn it, and that's 5 degrees of steering. So like if you wanted to turn the thing in a circle, it'd take more than a half mile.
Yeah, right. Well, at that speed, you don't want a lot of input.
No.
And those fire, I mean, that's oxygen depleting stuff. I mean, you're lucky, it probably, that could have gone a lot worse, put it that way.
Yeah, it could have gone a lot worse. We dodged a bullet on that one, that's for sure.
So was that the end of the season when the clutch broke, setting up for the return?
So the clutch broke, and then it rained again, and that was it. So then we got everything all ready and went back in 2015 and got up there, and we're all sitting in the hotel the night before, and here comes the rain.
Yeah.
And it rained out, and then I think we didn't run for almost 2 years because of rain. And so then now it's to 16. Yeah, that was 14. Then we ran again in 16. And 16, we set the record. Now, this is kind of ironic. So my dad went 406.6 miles an hour on his one-way run. So in 16, we went up there and we ran a 412 and whatever it was, a 402, I think. Anyway, we set the record because we got it both ways, and we went 406.7. After almost whatever that is, 46 years or something, we beat the old man by 1/10 of 1 mile an hour.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember seeing that, thinking that is really, it's just one of those things. It's a Bonneville thing. Those kind of things happen. And it's like everything means something up there, it's crazy.
And you need to learn each time, because then we went back the next year. So, we came back later in 16 and we ran the FIA event. And I don't know why I ran that, because it's a whole lot of extra work. And the only thing it does is it gets certified by the FIA for the record, versus being certified by SCTA,
right?
BNI. So, and it's really expensive to do, because I think we had 6 people running up there. It was a Mike Cook shootout, very well run event.
Yeah.
And all that, but the FIA fees and all that. And you have to make complete both runs within 1 hour.
Right. Yeah, that's insane.
So now you take our car, for example. So typically, every run we do, but we couldn't do it for the FIA because we didn't have enough time. We practiced pit stops and had it down to 26 minutes. So we start at the big end and run to the small end down to the freeway. Our pit was right next to the freeway, and for the international course.
Okay.
And anyway, it's it's so to do the pit stop, you got to put basically 42 gallons of fuel in it. You got to change oil in both engines and both dry sump systems, 4 tires, adjust the valves, change 32 spark plugs, and then be turned around and ready to go. And you have to finish out the other end, the back door, within your 1 hour time.
Within the hour. So you got to run too within the hour.
Yeah. Now, FIM for the motorcycles, they get 2 hours. Why
that seems like it should be opposite. Yeah.
It sure seems like it should be opposite. So anyway, we ran up there and we started we got everything down. We were all happy. The big end we started at, and it was pretty mushy down there. And Cook Jr. pushed us off. because we had our regular push truck driver stationed at the 7 mile mark. So if we didn't coast all the way to the other end for our pit stop, he could be sitting there to push me rest of the way.
There you go.
After you went. So, you have all these plans of how you got to do everything. But at 414 miles an hour, we lost a dry shaft. So dry shaft went out, took the tire and basically the wheel out when it went. Things slid sideways at 400 miles an hour for 1.5 miles.
Oh, man.
The dry shaft went out, hit the salt, and the car was dead sideways, right? So the dry shaft came back in, bounced back in the car, and took out a bunch more stuff, air jack system, and tore a bunch of the bodywork up, went back out, and came back in again.
Oh, my gosh.
So it tore everything up so bad, and broke the rear end and the traction bars and all the stuff. Broke the back of the transmission. Just terrible. So we had to go home. So that was the end of 16. And then 17, we went back again, and the track was just terrible. It was so rough and cobby and so sharp. Like if you would have rubbed your hand real hard on the salt in 17 against the grain of the salt, it'd almost make you bleed.
Wow.
That's how shardy it was. I'd never seen it like that. And just rough. When I went by the 3 mile mark on our first run, those signs, the mile marker signs are 4 feet by 4 feet, with the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on there. And I could not see the 3 mile. I saw the orange, but I couldn't make out what it said. That's how rough. And anyway, so
you're shaking.
435 and qualified. So now we're really happy. And next morning we go back for the return run, and we broke 6 rods in the front motor. So it's just, it's ongoing. I mean, the maintenance and, we check bearings. It's just like a top fuel deal, check bearings in between runs and all that kind of stuff. So,
all right. So on that 435 run, you've been at this point over 400 a few times.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now all of a sudden,
run, but the first one was over 400 with that car.
Yeah. But this time you still have to be thinking about the fire bottle incident in the back of your mind, just as a Murphy's Law thing that could happen. And you're also getting shaken all around in the car. What's going through your mind at that point? It's hard to see. That takes some focus.
Yeah. And as far as the fire bottle deal, though, that was out of my mind. That kind of stuff, it's your job to make that not be important and make it not count. Because if you're thinking about that kind of stuff, when you're going 2.5 football fields every second, you better be eyes on, eyes on the job. So, but yeah, so you do. You think about it in ways of you're trying to make it never happen again, prevent it from happening.
Especially on the prep work and the repair and all that.
Exactly. But once you get in that car and my guys tell me to go, I don't have to think about did they tighten the wheel or did they do this or did they get that lock on the windows? Once the canopy's down, when you better be ready to go because it's time to take care of business.
Yeah. So that's ultimate trust in the team by working together. Yeah. And so you can't even have those thoughts.
No.
Love that.
No, you cannot. So the thing didn't do anything bad. It just broke the rods. And once again, we turned around, put everything on the trailer, went back home, put 16 new rods in the 2 motors, got everything ready, on our way back up to Bonneville and get a phone call. It's raining. It's raining,
of course.
So 17 was done.
Now, when that thing broke the rods in the motor, it didn't window the block or anything? It just...
Didn't window the block, but it hurt it inside. And we took it back over to the boys at Brad Anderson's, and they welded everything back up for us and, reline board everything.
Fixed it,
got everything square to the world and, so the rods only had, so we kind of stated this a second ago. So every run, we only made 10 runs with that car ever.
Wow.
Runs. So and troubles like, with the fire bottles and the rods and the clutch, those are 3 runs that didn't get to the other end.
Sure.
And, but each time, you're trying to figure out, how to make it better. Well, so the thing, when the rods broke, the thing had 8 runs on it. 8 runs on the rod. So you're thinking 8 runs, that's nothing. So I mean, I call the rod guy and say, hey, what's the deal on your product here? They broke. And they go, well, there's no guarantee in racing and all that stuff. And go, but then we started figuring it out. So the funny car guys and top fuel guys, they change that stuff out all the time, right? Well, but they run 4 seconds at a time.
That's it. Yeah.
We run 86 seconds. And so once we started backing all the numbers into the deal, we had 132 runs on that thing by dragsters.
By drag racing, yeah.
So that was us.
I mean, you probably had 70 miles on the car, if you think about it.
Yeah, that'd be right. Yep.
And at that RPM for that long, it's amazing they held on like they did.
Yeah. So, we learned. So, I mean, and our little dinner the other night with the boys, it's, what are we going to do different if we get a new deal going, and got to run blown motors. The plan is to build another car. So,
nice.
That's if we can find the funding, or if I can find the funding.
Well, I do want to hear about all the future plans, but I do also want to finish out that Challenger 2 story, and what you ended up with for the final record.
So that was the end of 17 when the rods broke, and like I said, we drove all the way back up there because we left the big trailer there and everything. And it rained, and so when I got there, it was underwater. So I just turned right and went over to Colorado. And anyway, in 18, basically the last 2 years, my wife and I prepped the car in Colorado because we were far away from all the guys. Because we had moved from the shop in Huntington Beach back to Colorado, and because that's where our home was. And so my wife does all the tires and mounts all the tires and all that kind of stuff, and takes care of that. Plus, taking care of all the people and the logistics and all that stuff. So, and then we would come a month before Bonneville back to California, and then the engine guys would do their deal, go through the whole engine deal and get everything prepped that way. And so then it was just us doing it. And anyway, so 18 we go back up, and now 18 we're done. This is the last year we're going to run. We can't afford to run anymore. We don't have any spare parts. Everything's starting to now get miles on them, 70 miles.
Right. Yeah.
and so in 18 we go, and the salt's way, way better than it was in 17, and pretty nice. And our first run, we run 446 miles an hour. And,
yes.
The hair just stood up on my arms again.
Yeah.
And, get back, everything, nothing. We broke a valve spring, so we had one of the 2 engines was run on 7 cylinders, but everything else was pretty good. Went back, changed the valve spring, go through tech, and I don't know when people that don't run Bonneville don't realize, but so if you qualify for a record, which means you're over the existing record by at least 1%, then you go to what they call impound. So you have 4 hours to work on your car, and only 4 hours under. In one basically supervised area.
Yeah, not at your trailer.
Not at your trailer. You got to do it down there in impound, behind the ropes with the SCT officials, roaming around. And so they watch you, and not like a hawk or anything. They're real good about it. And so then you do all your prep. And for a 2-inch, so for us, that means, pull the oil pan on both motors and put bearings in it if need be. And, the fuel and the oil, and the same thing like we were talking about for the 1 hour stop. And 4 hours seems like a lot of time, but it is not very much time at all.
Mm-mm.
So at 4 hours, you have to put the cover back over it, and then you get to come back at 6 in the morning. And at 6 in the morning is when you get to make your return run. And I tell you what, that 1 hour you're trying to get a 2-engine car ready to go and warmed up and oil warmed and all that, you need that 4 hours again. But I was telling my wife and I were talking on our walk this morning. We were talking about this one. So we got all these people, and we're just thrashing and everything. And there's this little Carmen Ghia that's parked over like 2 little slots away from us. And I'm looking at it, and I didn't think about this till probably months later, but I'm thinking, well, that guy's not going to make his return run, all this work and everything, and not get his return run. Well, about 5 minutes before they take you back down to the start line, here comes this guy, and his wife lets him out of the station wagon, and he gets in his car, turns the key, has his helmet right there, and drives up to the thing. One person, I'm thinking, there's got to be a lot to be said for that for Bonneville right there.
For sure. Yeah, that's great. Now,
anyway,
18, I was there in 18, but wasn't that the year that the first couple days there wasn't any racing going on because they were still grooming or a few things are drying off yet?
No, 18, I think that happened to 17. 18,
Okay.
18 we were I think the second car to go off the start line. The first day it's about 10 or 10:30, something like that, 10:45, because you have a driver's meeting and all
right.
stuff before.
So that's why I missed it, because I was still traveling in.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So 4:46 and all happy and back to impound, and you get everything all ready for the morning and go back out in the morning and take off. This is a great story. So I've been around nitromethane all my life, right? My dad running dragsters and all that stuff, and but I have so much more of appreciation for nitromethane nowadays and what it does and what it can do. And I always tell Richard Catton, who was the main engine builder, and we had Richard Catton and Craig Johnson and Rich Kurtz for our engine guys. Rich did the bottom ends, and then Craig was on one engine and RC was on the other engine. And I always tell him, more nitro, man. I want more nitro. And he goes, no, we don't want to hurt it, and we don't want to do this. And so we ran the 446 run on 84%. And then we put 3% more in it for Sunday for the return run. Sunday for the return run. And so we're sitting there, and now I'm all bolted in. I'm sitting in between basically about 6,000 horsepower between the two engines, and it's on alcohol, warming up on alcohol. We got little plugs that warm it up on alcohol. And then RC tells me over the radio, he goes, fuel pumps. So they shut the alcohol off from outside the trailers, and I pushed fuel pumps on in the engine, and now it goes to nitro. And I'm going, something's way different. What's so different? And I'm going, just listening, Yeah. You're sitting in between these two engines, so it's not like you can really hear. And anyway, got all ready, and they pushed me off. And I went, oh my gosh, I've got the tiger by the tail now, man.
Yeah, and just that additional 3% made that difference, huh?
They were thinking 500 horsepower.
Wow.
Yeah. So that thing left, and I went, oh man. And it left hard and went really good. And through the 2, 3, I mean, it was sailing. Now I can't see, I'm not really looking at, I have a GPS speedometer in there, but I can't look down there long enough and still pay attention to, where you're going. Even though that steering is very slight, like we were talking about earlier, it doesn't take much to go from one end of the track to the other, basically 100 feet wide. It doesn't take much of a turn to get over there. And the thing takes off, and I mean, it is sailing, and it goes through first, second, and we're into third gear, and we're at about the 4 and the 3rd mile mark. And that's where the big dip is in the mountain over on the left-hand side, on the west side. And that wind comes whistling through there. And we had about a 12-mile-an-hour crosswind that came through there. And so the thing's got about 6% wheel slip at that speed. And that car just went dead sideways. And so now I'm looking at the mountain range out my front window, not at Floating Mountain. And then it comes back, and I go, oh, man. The thing that you always do whenever you get sideways at Bonneville is you pull the parachute. Because what that
straighten
happens,
out.
Yeah, it separates the center of pressure from the center of gravity, and it gives the car more stability when it's in yaw. So when it's sideways. That's the first thing you do. And it's like I had mentioned earlier, we didn't have any more money. We weren't coming back. This was the last run that was ever going to be made on the car. And you've been working on it, 8 years. Are you going to throw that run away? So I pedaled it, and it went the other way. And now I'm looking over towards Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
Man. And then when it's starting to come back on that, so it did that 3 times, and when it's coming back on the 3rd time, it's coming back slower than it did the first 2 times.
Okay, so that's good.
So I thought, you know what, I can pick the throttle up and go. And so as it came back, I picked the throttle up, and it went dead straight, and we went out the door at 4:59.
Oh man, that is insane.
It was
and
I
think I've seen cockpit video of that, where you're all of a sudden you're driving this car, because the video that I saw doesn't really have a view out the front glass, but you definitely see you spinning the steering wheel back and forth, and it's like, oh man,
Yeah, it's on YouTube under, I think, Thompson LSR. There's a car camera from a couple different angles and stuff in there. So yeah, but it went out the door. So that was the mile speed was 450 with a 446, so it made a 448 757 average. So we were happy on last run, and it broke a rear end on that run, and we didn't know it till we got home and stuff. But yeah, it was yep, Bonneville.
Yeah, that is too cool. And so that got you the crown of fastest piston-driven, wheel-driven vehicle, right?
We were the fastest wheel-driven piston-powered car ever.
Yeah.
I think for about a year and a half or 2 years until George, went by us. So
yeah.
And that was a year. So we went out and ran that 450 basically, and then George went out and ran like a 460, and then Vesco went out and ran, I don't know what it was, a 470 or 80. So the Hot Rod Trophy just kept changing hands right away.
It kept bouncing around, yeah. And interestingly...
We backed it up.
Yes.
We backed it up the next day. So
yeah, you did. And you were using, all three of those cars are just polar opposite technology, which is so cool about it. Yeah. So I think your dad would have been pretty darn happy with that accomplishment.
I think so. Yeah. And we got the record to the Thompson family name officially.
For sure.
That's one thing. That's why my dad built Challenger 2 to begin with. It was to bring that record to the Thompson family. And so I finished his business and accomplished mine. So yeah, it was a proud moment.
Yeah, how cool is that? I mean, the same way that you had that sense that you didn't want to be sitting on the couch at 80 years old wondering whatever would have happened. I think that's the best way to describe it. Your dad had unfinished business, and you did it. That's so cool.
And that's how my son Travis, he did all the PR work and everything for us, and he'd never done that before. And that's what he titled it, Unfinished Business.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Yeah. I probably saw it subliminally.
Yeah, and it's on the website, thompsonlsr.com.
Yeah, perfect. So then, after the Challenger 2 story, you were wheeling the Ferguson streamliner.
I did. I was the very first car I ever drove at Bonneville was Ferguson's car, and I've known those guys for a long time. So, like I said, I drove their car there a long time ago before I drove the Pumpkin Seed and before I drove the Mustangs for Ford. That we went back and challenged my dad's records, and we duplicated that thing. I think 48 years later or something, with running 3 Mustangs up there like my dad did. Different years, and got some records there. So, but yeah, then went to Ferguson's car and knowing those guys and knowing their construction, and they're really smart. There's 3 sons. There's D2, D3, and then there's Randy, and these guys they're really sharp, and they've gotten so many people into the 200 mile an hour club. And D2, which is Don Jr., Senior was a big Bonneville guy too before the boys came along. So the history with the Fergusons up there, and I don't know how many people they've gotten in the 200 mile an hour club, but if you work for them, and of course it's all volunteer and everything, you go up there and work for them. Eventually, he usually puts you in their car, in one of their cars or a roadster, not the big streamliner, but they have, I think, 3 cars they run up there.
Yeah.
And you end up getting records. So all sorts of people. I mean, you look at the crew at Ferguson's, they all got red hats on. And blue hats for D2 and D3. Both got blue hats, so they've both been over 300. So,
for sure.
That's a good group, really good group. So anyway, I'm going to go back up there. I drove for them 2 years ago. We got rained out last year. 2 years ago, and we bumped their own record from 349 to 385. And so it was a B streamliner, which is under, what is it? I think the engine was 421 inches in that. So, and nitro, and Ferguson, he likes to run a lot of nitro. Like we run 94%.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, they seriously, they hammer their stuff.
That's hot.
But we were fortunate enough, the nice car and well prepped and all that stuff. And then, so that was in B. And then last year we went up there with a C motor. So this is quite interesting. So Don takes number 8 piston and rod out of it, puts a plug in that hole, and we're running it on 7 cylinders. And that one cylinder made about 71 or 72 cubic inches. So now, this year, we're running C.
That is so awesome.
So we're running it on 7 cylinders. So,
and there's, and there's a little more to it than just pulling that piston out of that hole. I'm sure tune and balance and.
Yeah, exactly. Bob weight the crank and, all that stuff. So it'll be interesting. We were up there last year, all, went through tech and sitting there ready when it rained. And so we were out. So anyway, looking forward to that come August.
So earlier you mentioned, the future going forward with maybe a different car. What are you thinking?
So we're looking for partnerships now. Mm-hmm. And because we got to make sure we have all the funding and everything lined up before we do it. Mm-hmm. And we want to build another car, unlimited car. It'd be a blown class, and we'd like to chase that 500-mile-an-hour deal.
Man.
So Gibson has already got preliminary drawings done and stuff. We don't have any, solid drawings or anything. They're all guesswork and stuff like that, and what we want it to look like. And we go back and forth every week on 1 engines or 2 engine. Gibson says to go 100 miles an hour faster, which would be 550, with a kind of basic design, because you can't, with a 4-wheel drive car, you can't vary too much. You can't put that needle nose on there like Poteet has and like Altique had with 4-wheel drive, because you need the width. The wheels can't follow each other; they got to be beside each other. So it'd be 4-wheel drive and 1 or 2 engines. But like I said, we keep going back and forth. And find some money. And I'm ready. I'm only 73. I got some laps left in me,
Oh, heck yeah. Well, you certainly have the enthusiasm and the passion for it. And that's what it takes.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So most of the same crew would come back and, build it from scratch. And, it's a that's hard with a sponsorship deal because it's a couple year project. So they don't see the results right away,
Maybe, if it's done right, if you're, if your son would be willing to continue with his PR hat and promote this thing along the way, a 2-year-long sponsorship is a good one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and it'd probably be more like, I got it figured as 3, but 2 years before it ran. And then hopefully out of the box, and, that's another thing that people don't know, not that they don't understand, they don't know. At Bonneville, that's really, really hard. Any kind of racing series you go to, you get practice. You go
right.
Like Indy last week. They go up and make 3 laps, and I'll come in and adjust a bar or put stagger in it, or whatever their trick is to make it go faster. Mm-hmm. At Bonneville, you don't run for a year. You bolt yourself in that car, and you run 450 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's a totally different animal. And I think when you were saying before, when you were kind of wondering why you did that FIA event, maybe it's just the more seat time. You don't get you can't drive this thing down the street.
No. And you get, so now you get 68 seconds. Like we said, so I got 70 miles worth of that's not very many.
No, it's not. And to be that successful, and set records that's really something. I don't think, most people don't have any concept of what this takes, including me, because I've never done it. I'm just I talk for a living. But I equate this very much with, the early space program. You got one shot to launch this rocket, so everybody's got to be on the same page, and you got to get it right.
So that's interesting. The only difference is we can come in for a pit stop, and they can't.
Well, yeah, the Apollo 11 guys did. Yeah, they did a little pit stop on the big rock up in the sky for a few minutes. But so if somebody's interested, they want to reach out to you, they want to learn more, maybe they want to get behind the new car project, where can they find you?
ThompsonLSR.com is the website, and the website has all the information on it. And we're looking for people, that would like to participate. We want to put together a television series that'll cover, the stuff that you don't normally get to see, that you're not out there every week, and a television deal that'll be about the whole build of the car. And, try to give something back to sponsors more than, just 1 or 2 runs. or however many runs you need.
Well, I mean, I guess you guys being a handful of independents, you could work to create a custom program for whatever they needed, right? I mean, I'm sure you could work with multiple. So I guess the message there is that although it'd be wonderful to have some entity, back the whole program start to finish, you wouldn't be opposed if somebody said, hey, maybe I can help you a little bit. I mean, it's all going to help.
No. Yeah, it's all help. And that was this last project with Challenger 2, it became the people's car. I mean, we had people come up that would help us. I mean, I had this biker guy, I was at a gas station and with towing the car, and this guy comes up and he gets off his bike and he's walking toward me. I go, okay, what's going to happen right here?
Yeah, right.
And I'm looking at this guy. He says, you Danny Thompson? I go, yeah. He goes, here's $100. Hope this helps.
Oh, wow. Right, that is great.
And I mean, we had guys, Eric Honig was a guy that helped us out financially the first time around. And not only if you're going to help out as a sponsor, you got to be a team member too. So, I mean, Eric took care of all the fuel and mixing nitro and all that stuff. And then we had another guy named John Burke that came out of the woodwork. And John's the reason we got there the last 2 years. So it's just, and it was people would send money and, you'd open an envelope up and there would be, $100, and whatever. And I had this kid come up to me probably 7, 8 years old maybe. And he comes up and he says, here, I want to donate. And he gives me $1. And I said, no. I said, you keep that. Maybe you can buy an ice cream or something. He goes, oh, no. He says, I want to be part of this, sir. And
wow.
It's just, it was stuff like that with the whole project that made it be even more fulfilling than it already was.
That is so cool. What insight that kid had too. I'm impressed because he's going to remember that for the rest of his life. Yeah. Anyway, it was pretty cool. So, well, that's awesome. Danny, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. I'll be up there at Speed Week this year. So far, it looks like the weather's looking pretty good condition-wise. What do you think? What are you seeing? It's
been raining this last week a bit, but the picture, that's the first thing I do every morning when I get up is I look at the camera out there on the salt, and it looked good this morning. So I say it looked good. You couldn't see any water, and that camera is down about the 3 mile mark, 4 mile mark from the end of the road. So it's over against where the dike is.
Yeah, and it builds anxiety because it's wet and it's not. It's wet and it's not. It's wet and it's not.
Yeah, and that's part of Bonneville. I mean, if you can't deal with that, you better not go. And if you get up there and you think it's too wet to run, don't go. But, I mean, the problem is, it takes a lot of effort to get there. I mean, and we snivel because we drove up there and got rained out in 14 and 15, and then last year. But how about these people that are coming in from Australia and New Zealand and the European continent and stuff, and coming all the way over and have to turn around and go home and don't even get to run.
For sure. And
she can be wicked.
In fact, last year when it rained out at 22, I met a couple gentlemen from New Zealand and did a Bonneville Up to Speed podcast with these guys saying, what do you do now? And they're like, well, we're going to go find some hot rod shops and go see some cool stuff. So the attitude was awesome. But they were also not driving. They didn't bring a car over and have to manage that program. But you got to be a little flexible.
Yep, you got to be. It's Bonneville. She's like I said, she can be wicked or she can be beautiful, and she does what she wants to do because she makes way more horsepower than we do.
Awesome. Well, listen, again, I really appreciate the time. I will definitely see you up there this year and say hello, and I wish you all the best in getting the new car program off the ground. The Bonneville Up to Speed podcast is produced with the blessing of the Southern California Timing Association and is available on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe if you're into land speed racing, if you like to hear stories like this, and be sure to visit scta-bni.org for all the latest news and the calendar of SCTA racing events and stuff at El Mirage and the Bonneville Salt Flats. So, Danny, thanks again for joining us.
All right. Thank you. Cheers.
You got it. Thanks for tuning in. For Danny Thompson, I'm Kevin Oeste, and now you are up to speed.